I want to bring as many people into the sport as possible because I do think it's transformative. I do think it's the best friggin' community out there. So many people are welcoming. So many people welcome me.
Welcome to the Borderlands Trail and Ultra Running Podcast. My name is Josh. I'm the host. I'm the founder of Borderlands Trail Running. The other day I bought my son a toy, and after playing with it for about 2 hours, he came over to me and said, "Dad, slap me. I don't know if I'm awake. I'm so happy to finally have this toy." And so I slapped him 3 or 4 times, and it turns out he didn't actually have the toy. I never bought it for him. I'm just kidding. I bought it for him, and I didn't slap him. Point being, I felt that same way with Billy. I got to hang out with Billy, and it was surreal because I've been watching his content for a number of years. Not only watching it, but I had been inspired by it for so long. It was an absolute pleasure to get to talk with him, and we did it in honor of, one, just the community in Salt Lake City in general. It's a wonderful trail running community that's growing. Second, we did it to celebrate the race that I have coming up that Path Projects is sponsoring on May 31st. It was sort of a get hype for that. We ran a portion of that route with Billy. And that race is on May 31st. We have a 10K, half marathon, and 50K in the foothills of Salt Lake City. You can find that on Ultra Sign Up. And then also celebrating a great relationship that we have at Open Range Races and at Borderlands with Path Projects. Billy is the first cause for a lot of runners and a lot of creators. He's sort of the one that brought a lot of us in, helped us understand it. I think if Chris McDougall brought a lot of us in and on the level of how do you run and all of that, Billy helped bring a soul, and I tell that to Billy, and that's why I'm grateful for him. There's a real soul to trail running from those late teens to now, thanks to, in part to his, just brilliant monologues and documentaries that he'd put out. This was my chance, though, to get to ask him a ton of questions that I had always wondered about, just as a fan. And I think what you're going to see here is a conversation that I probably would have had even if we weren't recording for the live audience and all of that. There was even a moment in the podcast where we have to kind of hit pause and say, hey, we've gone down such a deep dive on some nuance of Billy's career that maybe perhaps we've ceased to be entertaining. But I also disagree with that because I think that's why this is interesting, to get to know Billy on such a deep level. I flew from Paris to Salt Lake City to make it happen. This was a heavy lift, and so I have to thank the sponsors that have helped make this happen. First, Path Projects and Floris Gearman have been awesome in arranging this with Billy and facilitating that run. They provided everyone who showed up to that run, like 70 people, with a Path Projects beanie. I think that was above and beyond, in my opinion. That was super cool of them to do. Tomorrow Coffee, TMRW.coffee. Use Borderlands at checkout and get 20% off your coffee. They do beautiful single origin coffee and blends. I'm a huge fan. Finally, a new sponsor that I'm really pumped on is Naked Innovation Sports. They introduced the world's first performance waistband for carrying everything you need to perform in the safest manner possible. I don't know if you've ever worn it or if you've ever seen it. I guarantee you've been near someone who has. I mean, it's one of the top selling waistbands. More world champions, ultra race majors, and ultra runners make Naked their number one choice. And you'll see their stuff on me more and more. I haven't been running with hydration packs because I've been doing short runs, but I've got Paris Eco Trail and the Paris Marathon, and I'm stoked to be wearing Naked. The Naked running band and vests allow runners of all ability levels, hikers, gravel riders, cross-country skiers, the choice to experience outdoors and carry all the necessary gear without compromise. I hope that you will support these sponsors. None of this would be possible without them. And I know that if you enjoy the content, that the best way that you can say thank you is to click on the links below and do an honest look at all of the stuff that we have going on with sponsors here at Borderlands. Is how we make this happen. So thank you, Naked, for joining the team here at Borderlands with sponsoring this episode with Billy. And without any further ado, here's my new friend, Billy Yang, after a cold run in Salt Lake City on a nice January day. Enjoy.
Where to even begin? I mean, I have such special memories of getting into trail running. So, like a lot of us, probably came, through Chris McDougall and Born to Run. There was just this massive moment in creating running, runners, new runners, people to go out, people to admire what Scott Jurek had done, and all of the, the figures from Born to Run. I was telling Floris this while we were on our run of what I think was great about you, Billy, and what you brought to the scene was that Chris brought people into the scene, and I feel like your documentaries did a really incredible job of giving it a soul. I My first question of what I'm curious about, I mean, if I think about, the why, which seems, that's been the one that's had the most views. Do you know the stats? Are you aware of how many unique viewers you have compared to total views? Meaning, do you know how many times people have watched? You know how many times I've watched that, like with people, trying to show them what I'm out there trying to do when I run 100 miles? It's like the go-to thing to try and show what I'm doing out there.
Sorry, I'm getting over something. So I will never get used to that. I think my instincts behind that was to make something to talk to the average person, maybe a spouse, maybe a friend who thinks, I don't even like to drive that far, and just humanize it, but tell it from a perspective of I firmly consider myself like a mid to back of the packer. So, like the elites that I may have started covering when I was making like documentaries about like Sally and some of the Nike boys. I can't really relate to that. I do think it's really exciting and it's definitely a part of our sport, but I identify a lot more with people who are fighting cutoffs to finishing somewhere around like 24 to 30 hours in a 100-mile race. So I just wanted to tell it from that perspective, and that was my only instinct. And I kind of feel shortchanged because Goo came on as my only sponsor, and they only had like a few shekels to throw my way. I was like, all right, I had this idea percolating in my head, and I thought I'd make it and make myself the protagonist of the subject, which is always awkward too. And I'd never in a million years would I have thought like that would be my most viewed piece of content. Like it just doesn't feel right to me when I've covered people like Sally McRae and Zach Miller and like.
Oh, I see. Because you were the figure, it felt weird
Yeah.
that the most popular one that you've ever put out, you're the star.
Right, and then you go even further, and I've had people come up to me and like tell me that they found ultra running because they view that piece of content, and I still feel like a participant. Like all of this feels very bizarre and surreal to me. And even saying out loud at the start of the community run, I'm like, I've been running trails for over 15 years. Still sounds kind of weird coming out of my mouth because I feel in some regards, I still feel like I just started. And then content creation over a decade, and that still sounds weird to me. So I don't know, it's maybe just a part and parcel of getting old and just time going by really fast. Yeah. But I definitely like go through some imposter syndrome, like people really know me for this stuff. It takes some getting used to.
I mean, I remember I'm trying to get my dad to understand what I'm out there doing when for those who don't know my story, I've tried to run 100 miles 10 times and I've finished twice. And my dad is, supportive and, was in my corner. He's no longer with us, but he was in my corner for me. I was like, you got to watch the why. I mean, just a beautiful memory of sitting with my dad. And that was the time that he kind of got it, I think a lot of people, so back to that comment, like the soul, like I feel like, and I wonder if you have a different way of wording it or if you agree, the way that you presented it, like the monologues that you put before those documentaries, you helped to give words to us who are out there doing it for any other reason except fitness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like fitness was maybe number 15 on the list of what we're out there doing. And I feel like the why was the first way I could relay to non-ultra runners, this is what I'm doing. And they started to get it. My dad still said I was crazy, but at least then he got to see it and it started to click for him what it was.
Yeah, I do think it's the old adage of it's 20% physical, 80% mental. But within that 80%, I also put emotional, I put the soul. I put so many other different things under that category and that umbrella because it is a journey of the soul. It is, you're intentionally paying $400 or $500. I don't even know what races cost these days, but it's.
I just did an episode about it that released this week. Your mind will be blown, actually. It's
really?
gone up. Yeah.
Okay,
anyway, we'll talk later.
Okay, yeah. But it's For me anyway, and I can't speak for everybody here, but for me, it is very much a journey of the soul, and putting yourself through the crucible of running a 50, 100K, 100-mile. It involves some like shedding of whatever, whatever perception you may put out there, and then it does reduce you to your true authentic self. And I think there's a lot of beauty in that journey.
Yeah.
And so to hear that, that's great. I mean, not a lot of people can identify with it. I know there's a lot more like bro-y dudes who are just finish at all costs, David Goggins, Kevin Haynes type people. And
Yeah.
I can't really identify with those people because for me, it's so many, it started with me and my dad too. After I lost my dad, it's how I found this incredible community of ours. So
Wow.
There's a lot of emotional connection to, why we do what we do. And hopefully, I'm glad people can resonate with that.
I think this is why your documentaries, is that on?
No, I was fidgeting with it, yeah.
I think that's why your documentaries are about elite runners are so interesting, because I think about the Nike, did you say the Nike boys?
Yeah.
The 2015, 2016 running of the CCC at UTMB.
Yeah.
When you tell the stories of the elites, you're still telling it soulfully. And I think that's why someone like me, I'd give anything to be Zach Miller and have his ability, but I don't. But because you tell it soulfully instead of from the perspective of his performance, even though we can all obviously see the performance is incredible.
Yeah.
But you bring the soul into it. I think that's what's special about it.
Yeah, and it helps to have a Zach Miller type who has so much character and gives everyone like so much of his time and undivided attention. And I have a good friend of mine who underwent like haggling surgery recently, and I said, "Hey Zach, I know you went through something similar. Like, do you mind talking to him?" And he has some questions, and Zach was like, "Oh yeah, no problem," and just like pass on his number. And I think that's like the ethos of our sport. It doesn't matter if you're Jim Walmsley, Zach Miller, you name it, Killian. Like everyone is so approachable and so kind and generous with their time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to camp out on Zach for a minute, I'd love to hear the story about it, because for those, I don't know if you were, if everyone in the room was with me, but when you dropped the trailer for Zach, I was freaking out. I was so excited because I was, into Zach Miller as an elite, loved watching what he was doing. I loved the Hayden Hawks versus Zach Miller. I think, did Jamil do that? Jamil Curry do that one? Yeah. So, I'm there for it. And you dropped the trailer, but the trailer came out, you'll know the exact number, 2 years before you ended up putting out the full length. Am I right on that? I don't know if it was 2 years. It was a long time.
It was a long time, yeah.
Why? For us diehards,
That's a good
we see
question.
that. We know. I have my guess, but I think I even would know the answer because I paid such close attention. But why the distance between the trailer and when you actually released it?
Because we were both chasing that proverbial white whale.
Yeah.
That was a UTMB, first male to win the race.
Yeah.
It was, I wanted to have like that Alex Honnold moment in free solo when he finally conquers El Cap. And I think, we both were like, should we give this another shot? Do we want to come back? It's her story here. And eventually, I mean, if it were up to me, I would have kept chasing it, honestly.
Yeah.
But it got to a point where I think he was. It's an unsexy answer, but when we finally released the film, it was because he was severing his ties with the sponsor, Buff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they're like, hey, let's put something out because we put So it's that was the reason. I mean, it doesn't explain the first answer, but it kind of does, because I released it thinking like I have all the faith in the world that Zach's gonna conquer this beast sooner rather than later. It turns out it was later.
Yeah.
And I guess not fully conquered because he was
But
second.
pretty darn close.
Yeah. It was exciting race in 2023.
Yeah. Me and Joey and Jared, the race directors of the race, we were all there, like front and center, waiting for the, that moment for him to come across.
Yeah.
But so from my perception, what I admire about that is you release it, and I don't know, if you release it, my guess would be that you were thinking it's going to be coming soon. And then to say, well, should we give it another shot? That meant 12 months, so that, like the patience. So I probably accounted for like 5% of your views on that, because I just thought, in
Of
my
the trailer?
Yeah, because in my anticipation, I was like, all right, well, let's just watch this again.
Yeah.
Because the footage was great. I mean, I just remember them running on the UTMB. I don't know if you had. I can't remember if it was a drone. I just remember you, like, seeing them go through. You know, I hadn't been to Chamonix yet. I hadn't seen it, and so to get to like that was the first time I really got to see in its glory some of the course. And there's Zach,
Yeah.
and it was when Zach and Jim and Killian were trading off, and I remember going to sleep that night and waking up to everybody DNF'd, I think, except for Killian. So to say that you're going to go on, I admire that, because you put the story first, but also I can see that you put the trailer out. Maybe it was kind of hard to wait too, but I don't know.
I mean, that's the risk you run into when you do something about real life.
Yeah.
Like, you have real life results, unfortunately, and that means not completing the tasks for second, third, and fourth, however many years we chased it. I remember when that race between him and Xavier. Sorry if we're getting like too inside baseball. Some of you may not care.
Yeah, if you guys want to go grab some coffee.
But I think maybe, if anything, it underscored my stubbornness and my willingness to wait as long as I can to be somewhat of a perfectionist and to have that perfect bookend that never really came.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then when it came out, I mean, it was, even though he didn't get it, it was very satisfying. I mean, because I'd been waiting for it for so long, for one.
Yeah.
But
Well, thank you.
it was very good. And so I think of like Zach, the figures who've shown up in the documentary work that you've done, from Zach to Tim Tollefson, David Laney from the Nike boys. When you're looking at bringing their stories out, what's the level of intention like? Are you sort of driving like the storytelling? Or are you really just like trying to capture it? And who we have come to believe Tim Tollefson to be, is that just really who he is? Meaning, what you captured in these documentaries of this nice guy who's out there giving everything he's got, like, do you feel like you're really truly capturing who they are off the clock? Because they seem like they're also your friends, when you're not at work.
Well, I think that's my intention with anyone, regardless of where they are, from front of the pack to, I did a story on this very, maybe not even middle of the pack, like a cutoff chaser when he ran Leadville. I did a film for La Sportiva. It didn't come out on my channel. Okay. But that was every bit as gratifying because I think my instinct with anything is to have a fully fleshed out protagonist, a hero that you can root for, and tell a three-dimensional story. If you can't tell a three-dimensional story, if you can't connect with that subject, what are we talking about here? They're just another fast runner. They're just another like faceless, nameless runner.
Yeah.
But it's with everything, right? I mean, that's the power of story, is if you connect with someone through storytelling and just kind of bring their true, authentic selves to life. I think I think that's where we're kind of at the crossroads of the sport becoming really fascinating with live broadcasts and everything else. But it's if you can't get the viewers to connect with the subjects through story, through like making them, rounding them out into not just about like how fast they can run a 100-mile race, but like who are they beyond when they take their trail shoes off. Like that's always my instinct.
Yeah, I mean, so you kind of touched on it when the sport's evolved a ton since the first content that you put out. What's your take on where it's at right now in terms of where it was? When I think about where it was, I'd characterize it this way: is that there was, I think of like the Anton Kaprichkas, like there were these like personalities I feel that were much stronger, and I don't know why that is. If they were just great storytellers that were able to bring them forward, and today it doesn't feel like it's as strong. And I don't know if it's the storytelling. I don't know if I'm just a jerk or what it is. But how would you characterize where it was in 2015, 2012, and where it is today?
I just think we have a lot more players, and that goes for athletes and content creators and podcasts. I mean, you name it, there's just a lot more media. So maybe the noise is amplified, but I do think the opportunity to tell some really great stories and have the means for anyone here, like if you wanted to become a content creator, if you wanted to tell stories about your best friend running their first 100-mile, like it's never there's never been a better time. And so I'm really excited about that. I do think I have 2 feet, like both my feet kind of firmly entrenched in like both camps of like, I want to, I want to bring as many people into this. At the same time, I do think there is a way to grow it responsibly and to grow it with integrity and to grow it in a meaningful way where we don't lose that soul. You know, we don't just get the bros showing up and saying like, yeah, I'm gonna crush Leadville. And I don't mean to be dismissive.
You're not naming names,
but you know what I'm saying. Like it's. Like I think you can have both, but at the same time, for me anyway, because the soul is so important, that I do like I feel like it's imperative within me to grow it in a very meaningful way.
Yeah, and you've got your, talk about feet, a number of feet. Your feet are in a lot of different areas. Like was it when it comes to the Western States broadcast or anything? Like you're kind of in a lot of places. You're on stage at, TrailCon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If you had the time you had now, that you had in 2015 when it seemed like you were putting out more of your own documentaries on your own channel. Mm-hmm. Do you see any stories right now that you wish you had time to tell, that you could tell in the same way if time was available to you?
Yeah, I would definitely. So one of my responsibilities, I'm part of the 15-member board of Western States board of directors, and I'm also tasked to direct and produce the live broadcast. And it was an interesting challenge. I mean, so first year it was almost exclusively, the spotlight was almost exclusively on the elites. And we did get some pushback about like, hey, I want to hear more mid to back of the pack stories. And my initial instinct was like, well, people aren't tuning in for that. People want to see the excitement of the front of the pack. But then I also was like, hey, wait a minute, like there has to be, like, when we're talking about connection and when we're talking about having a rooting interest, like, why can't we do that? Why can't we tell the story for the 14-hour finishers to the 30-hour finishers? So, and so that was my mission last year, specifically to amplify the mid to back of the pack voices a lot more. And I went to Western States training camp with the sole purpose of following and like just running with people and like, hey, are you running the race this year? Oh, let me talk to you. And just got their stories, put it out on social media, and people loved it. People absolutely loved it, and then tied it back around when they finished during the live broadcast. I mean, yeah, the live broadcast of the race, and everyone's like, oh, remember that girl? Oh, she was this person, or like that guy was that, and like, again, like just going back to the power of story, that is the power of story, and that is how you get more people into the sport. It's like, you just make the community a lot more accessible, and maybe people draw inspiration from who knows whom, like not necessarily the front of the pack.
Yeah, I mean, even your LA Dodgers, even the elite sports, like the big sports, they are uninteresting without story.
Yeah.
And so we don't notice it as much because it's, they do it so well. We root for a certain team or we root against a team because the story is being told so well. I think that's, what you talk about doing at a training camp and all that, like, you build that anticipation going into, Western States, and people will jump on, people outside the sport hopefully will jump on and want to do it. But is there somebody you see right now that you wish you had time to tell a more robust story about, a newcomer, or someone who's crushing it, Anton Kaprichka maybe, getting inspired and going back out, what he did at Leadville 2 years ago? Is there anything that's interesting to you right now?
Well, I don't think the imperative's on me. I think like what you're doing is plenty interesting because like getting to know you a lot more, you have this fascinating entrepreneurial background. You're doing all these different things, had all these different pots being stirred at the same time. And the first time you came on my radar was when you did that interview with Scott and Brian from Path Projects. And I was like, oh, this cat's kind of like, he's he has an attention to detail to putting out quality. You know, maybe not the numbers
Yeah.
where you should be, but
Yeah, hey, thanks.
you know, your intentionality and your attention to like putting out a good product so that people will want to tune in is
Yeah.
yeah. And I think
Yeah,
just
thanks.
like that. Telling of the entrepreneurial story, I think that's also fascinating in how we're talking about media and you know like what goes like maybe people aren't inspired to be content creators, maybe they want to start a brand, an outdoor brand,
Yeah.
and you're telling those stories. So
Yeah.
I mean I think the onus can be on everyone in here who has any level of interest in storytelling. It could be audio, it could be video, it could be you know a Substack.
Yeah.
But there's so many stories, especially as the sport expands. And so, sorry if I'm not like landing on one
No, that's
person in
fine.
media at the top of my mind, but I do think there's just like a million and one stories, especially as the sport is evolving and growing,
Yeah.
and how they found the sport. And you know, people are like, do they come from a drug addiction background? Do they come from a background where they're sedentary and overweight? So yeah, there's so many stories out there that can be unpacked and told.
And I think what you, I mean, so I was putting out documentaries, and by the way, from a quality standpoint, without Ben, wherever Ben is, it wouldn't be what it is without Ben. So shout out to Ben.
Yeah, shout out Ben.
Yeah. You know, I release documentaries, and I put out, you know, and I put a lot of work into the monologue. I don't know where you got it from. So this is my question. So people like me were looking at you doing documentaries. I mean, as the primary person who say, oh, he's telling these great stories. I've got an eye for the story, but I want to do this thing where at the beginning I pull them in emotionally. That's your calling card from my perspective. Who is so you inspired me. Who inspired you to do what you did? It doesn't have, I mean, not necessarily in running. Is there a filmmaker? Is there a storyteller? Is there an author? Like who do you point to?
Yeah, I mean, I did look to people like Jimmy Chin is a great storyteller out there. I feel like rock climbing in general is maybe about a decade in front of trail running. Okay. And so there's a lot of like rock climbing content that I absorbed and I thought is really cool. Like, I don't know if you ever saw Valley Uprising. Camp 4 produced that, and it just told the origin story of like Yosemite Valley. And I thought it was just like a really, like I related to it a lot. And I remember thinking, I still have this bigger vision of like telling the story of American ultra running and how it came to be, to the incredible growth that we see in the upticks and you know, from ultra marathon man, Chris McDougall and Born to Run, and what an impact that made, and all these like interesting cats and characters that came along. But at the end of the day, I think my inspiration has to be myself, and let me explain. Back in 2014, when I first produced the content that I was putting out on YouTube, I did it for somebody like myself. Ultra running is a very weird thing. Like, we love it when we're like in the middle of it, but just to get that initial momentum to get out the door, you need some motivation. I need motivation. Like, I need motivation before a race, before I'm about to do an ultra marathon. It's not like going out to eat a steak dinner. You don't need any motivation. You're like, I'm hungry. I'm gonna have a nice glass of Cabernet and you know, a nice ribeye, and like I don't need any motivation for that. But for something that we purportedly love, which is time outside, like that initial push to get outside, we need it. So so I was thinking about somebody like myself who just like, what's going to get me out there, but also just, continue to go back to that well of inspiration. And so it was for me, somebody like me.
I would say this about you, and I would say this about myself. Like, I feel like I represent kind of the everyman. Like, I'm an average person. I probably, have some overlap with 80% of the people in the field, in that I'm not trying to win this thing. I'm not gonna, but there's something mysterious that, calls me out there that I just have to do it. Last night after we had dinner, I was like, okay, I want to do a little bit more prep. I'm gonna watch some of your documentaries. And I turn on the Y, and it starts, I'm just saying how effective they are. It starts and I'm like, oh God, I got to sign up for something. But I can't right now because of my lot in life. I can't. And so I closed it. So I didn't watch anything in preparing for it because it's too effective at what you're saying of like, when you say that it's for you, it's because you represent this average person in the space of like, we've got a taste for it. We've done the 10K, then we went to a half marathon, then we did a 50K, and then we did the 50 miler, 100K, 100 miler. And it got when you have the taste, that, you know, content like yours is that thing that, you know, making your case for more brand deals for you. You push over the edge into people to going and, you know, handing over their money to a race director, which we have a race. No, I'm just kidding.
Is this a commercial part of the podcast?
Yeah. Open range. No. Anyway, yeah. So I just think that's what's, you know, you clearly have plenty of evidence, and here's more. It's just that you inspire people to go sign up for races, which is the best part of this community.
Well, why do we keep going back to that well? Like, why do we keep? I mean, when you're running out there like mile 64 of a 100-mile race, you're not like skipping through a forest. It's painful. It hurts. You're puking. You're shitting on the side of the woods. You're, you know, like you're being nudged by your pacer to like keep moving forward, to keep one step forward. And for some reason, at the end of all of that, you cross the finish line, and maybe not right in that moment, but the next day, 2 days later, you're like, yes, let's do it all over again.
Yeah.
Like, why do we keep going back to that well?
For me, it's I have this internal person that I believe I am, and I don't have external evidence. And so it's this thing I believe about myself that, to me, I've so grabbed onto the 100-miler because it's external proof of who I believe I am inside, and I don't have any way of showing it in my own head unless I go do a 100-miler. I've done businesses, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, I've done a lot of different things but to me, I don't think of those things as mattering. Something about me going for a 100-miler and even DNFing 8 out of 10 times, that is where I'm telling the story of who I am.
Why did you DNF 8 out of the? Like,
Where
why is
do
your
we want
percentage
to
so
start?
low, man?
Well, it's because I'm not very good at, okay. So my why never required a finish. I could satisfy my why for running 100 miles without the finish line.
Interesting.
I didn't have, until number 10, which was a documentary that Ben and I did together about Zion 100 miler last year. My 10th effort was the first time my why required a finish line. And then the whole time there was never even a chance that I was going to say no.
And what was your why prior to that?
My son had a tumor on his liver that had to be removed. And it was like this, I felt like I needed some sort of, I didn't know how to handle the pain, my pain of watching my son go through that. I needed to suffer in some way. Like it was this, I'm not saying it was healthy, but it was me saying like, and my wife had just given birth to my second child. It's like, so she's going through some pain. My son had a tumor. And it's like, I was looking for something in the pain because I was healthy. I was able to run 100 miles, or I was able to at least try, you know? And so I needed to get out there and I needed to go out and feel something for myself because I was by my wife's side, but she was the one going through all the pain. I was by my son's side. He was going through all the pain. So my first 100-mile attempt was I was in that space of like needing to feel the suffering for myself. And so I got to mile 80 at the Zion 100 miler that year. And it was just that one was just a mistake around things I didn't know about. Water and a water bottle falling off the side of a cliff. Jeremy Cox, I don't know if he's here. He dropped it. But yeah, everyone has a story. Sometimes I just wasn't trained and I shouldn't have started, but I thought, God, I'd rather DNF because I'm not ready than not start. I was telling Flores, we lived for a summer in Amsterdam, which is 12 feet below sea level. And I was signed up for Wasatch, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna do Wasatch. Then I thought, why not just DNF? Who cares? And I timed out, I made it to Upper Big Water, mile 48, at the cutoff. And I thought, I would rather DNF that than not have started. So a lot of it is, I just needed to be out there suffering and finding the end of myself. I wish the end of myself was more consistently on the other side of a 100-mile finish line, but I find the end of myself in the 20s, 20s and 30 miles. But then this last one was, my why is to finish. That was my only why, was to finish 100 miles. And when I did that, I was second to last place. I was 35 and a half hours. Zion has a very generous cutoff, and I'm thankful for it. And yeah.
I want to be clear, that wasn't a judgmental question. I was just
No,
genuinely
no.
curious.
No, I wouldn't receive it as that.
How's your son today?
He's great. I mean, he's after that happened, we had this horrifying moment where they couldn't figure out what was on his liver for 6 weeks. So he had pneumonia, and then they said he has to be clear of pneumonia for 6 weeks before we can operate, and we can't biopsy. All we know is that his liver is completely consumed by these tumors, but we don't know, and we won't know for 6 weeks. So we had this 6-week period while my wife was pregnant with baby number 2 of, we don't know. I mean, it was just this, it's even hard to think about 8 years later, 7 years later now.
Is there any crossover in that mentality of that ultra mindset of just like keep putting one foot forward?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that's the thing. So, you know, I often think, do ultras help me live like my day in and day out life better? Or do I push really hard in my day in and day out life better so I can be a better ultra runner? And really the answer is yes. But ultra running, because I'm ambitious as an entrepreneur, I try things that are really hard, and that's what I most prefer, is to try things that are really hard or that may not be possible. Sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. Ultra running is the ultimate in helping me. So I don't care if I DNF 100 more times, because I'm pulling from that over into trying to be a better dad, trying to be a better husband, a better entrepreneur. There's a lot of people in my sphere that I have influence over within that, and it makes me better in all of them. Being able to put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. I almost want to like reframe, you know, what's your why to like just why not? Like why not?
Yeah.
Why not give it a go? I am inspired by your story, and like just people like you who just go out there and try different things. I think being an entrepreneur is far more scary than going out there to run Wasatch.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more at stake, clearly, but it also underscores, you know, maybe where you and I might align is that we all, like this thing that we call life, and this is my cheesy moment here, but we all like get one shot at this. I mean, really, like we all get one shot at this. Like I have somebody who just got diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, 49 years old, healthy. He's a running buddy of mine, and just like knocked their life, like completely upended their life, and it's just like now the focus just becomes about like how do we make it another day, another week, another month. So I don't know, and in the wake of like what I saw in Los Angeles with the wildfires and the devastation and people losing their lives, their homes, like why not just take swings in life? You know, I lead a very unconventional life. My wife Hillary and I and our dog Charlie Salami, we live in a tiny home. We live very simply. Our North Star is to just experience life in all the myriad of different ways, through travel, through community, through trying hard things. And I think so far that steered us in the right direction and in us living our most authentic lives. Like we'll never have hundreds of thousands of dollars. We'll, you know, like, but we've tasted that. She's had a corporate past. I've had a corporate past. And we didn't find a whole lot of fulfillment. That's us. Like that's our North Star. Like it's not for everyone, but I do think, like, why not?
Yeah.
Why not try things and see where you land?
Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen?
And I want to hit on this, and then we're getting close. We'll get your questions ready. If out on the trail, this is my favorite thing about it, is that it's the great equalizer of all. Like when you're out on the trail and you're suffering and it's late in the race, whether it be you're suffering through a half marathon or a 10K or the 100 miler, there's just this thing that gets built out there that's in line with that of like the people that you meet and the way that you meet them and the way that you connect. I have a friend who's an evolutionary biologist named Alex, and you know he was saying the same chemicals that are firing in your body late in a race they're the bonding chemicals, and so like you're building these deep, rich bonds with people that bank accounts don't matter. Like none of the stuff that matters. There's something about trail running that is the great equalizer to me in terms of suffering. We're all getting beat up by it. We're all working through our own thing. We all have our own whys, but it's a powerful equalizer.
You really could be running next to a dirtbagger who lives out of the bed of his truck or a venture capitalist.
Yeah.
You just don't know, but everyone out there is on equal playing field, and
Yeah.
none of that other stuff really matters.
One of my DNFs, I was running next to a guy who played for the Baltimore Ravens. He was.
Oh, really?
He was second string, and he had just retired. But he was like, "Yeah, man, I just need to keep doing hard stuff." I'm like, "Wow," and which is harder, the NFL or running this 100-miler? And at the moment, he said the 100-miler, and I was like, "I'm stronger than NFL players." All right, I'd love to let you guys ask questions. I could ask questions all day, but if anybody has questions, please, this is your moment. I've got plenty more, but anybody have a question?
First of all, before my question, I want to say thank you both for being so vulnerable and talking about, kind of like your struggles with imposter syndrome, because I look at both of you, you're like amazing, inspirational, like people that everyone would want to be like. And also for saying, Billy, that, just how ultra running connects you with your true self, because that's something that I really, really feel strongly about. And I've been, it's really resonated with me in the last year. So thank you so much for that. I guess my question is, you said you've been creating content for 10 years and running trails for 15 years. I assume you're older than 15. I'm not sure. But what were you doing before that, and what led you to, this change of, career or lifestyle?
What's your name, by the way?
Anne.
Anne.
Yeah.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Anne hooks us up with Noon. And
yeah.
so thanks. That's who supports our race. That's our hydration partner. So thanks, Anne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the question was, what was I doing before this? I was working at our family liquor store, and it's tied to me losing my dad. He had a liquor store that when we immigrated to this country, and it's a large part of where my imposter syndrome comes from, is that I'm forever that 6-year-old kid that didn't know a lick of English, cried on his first few days of first grade, because I was just like transported to this strange world, and my entire life was to like fit in and be like everyone else, and I didn't really see value in being yourself, your true self, living your own life until like way into adulthood. But so I used to work a marketing job, and then one fateful morning, my dad was killed during a botched robbery. Had this liquor store kind of like on the outskirts of Beverly Hills, and it was a big deal at the time. There was a lot of like news fans and police, and this case kind of like, at least as far as like LA is concerned, was a big deal, and thankfully they apprehended them. But I think that's when I like kind of found my purpose, and not necessarily in what I was doing for a living, but it felt the most meaningful to help my mom and take care of our family and kind of step up as a man of the household. I was like 28 at the time. I'm 47 now, just so you know. But yeah, at that time I was, I found a lot more meaning in doing that than at my marketing job. So yeah, I was doing that, and then I would like moonlight into this little thing called content creation, and escaping on weekends to various races, and so that was my life before.
When did you go full-time into content from day job?
I was always like kind of managing our business somewhat. I went away from it more and more, and then in June of 2020, we actually lost our business during, there were Black Lives Matter protests, and unfortunately, like part of our store burnt down, it got looted, and that's a whole other story. But we eventually had to close, but it did like untether me from being like kind of having to like check in and manage to like being able to float around and travel a lot more freely. So
Wow.
yeah.
Hi, Billy. Hi, Josh.
Hey.
What's going on, man? What's your name?
I'm Andrew,
Hey.
a longtime friend of Josh's here locally. You mentioned early on talking about like as the sport grows and more media and more attention sort of comes to it. Where do you think that's going? What are you seeing in the next 5-10 years of the way that media sort of transforms in the industry? and in trail running? And what's that vision look like for you?
That's a good question. I honestly don't know where it'll go, but I can't talk too much about the next project, but there is, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think there's a lot of growth that a lot of, especially brands are, as far as brands are considered, there is that interest in trail running being the next thing. So yeah, I can't make any predictions. I do think it'll slowly kind of creep into the mainstream, and then I do think it's ripe for one either piece of content, movie, series that will make it explode. And then I think we just have to anticipate that. We, again, just like the stewards, the people, like I don't want to necessarily say it myself, but the people who I consider like peers and stewards and people I respect a lot, I do think the imperative is on them and us to make sure it grows in a responsible way. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that, but I would like to see and maintain the soul and the integrity of the sport, hopefully.
Yeah.
Josh, do you have an answer to that?
Well, yeah, I think about the responsible piece. It's hard when, I don't know what the compounding annual growth rate is anymore, but a couple of years ago it was like 16 or 17% that the industry is growing year over year. See new brands coming into it all the time still, and legacy brands investing into it. And, I think of New Balance, and they've had a piece in it, but I think, they're about to double, triple, quadruple down. And like, I don't know where it's going, but there's a ton of money. And so to your point, I don't know exactly, other than there's going to be money, and there's got to be the people, hopefully, the people who grab the money are good people. They may not be. I would love to see some element of the elite become a little bit more, NBA-like. I'd love to see, obviously bigger contracts, all that sort of stuff. And what I mean by NBA-like is, I was listening to an interview with Scottie Pippen yesterday. I love the shit talking so much. And we were talking, and we were having a conversation, about, playing basketball, playing college basketball, and just the way that you would talk, to each other. Like, I'd love to see some of that energy of an excitement of like it really mattering, and someone saying, Hayden Hawks has touched on that a little bit, like, saying that he's there to win. So I think that maybe as contracts grow that'll happen. But again, it's going to be who grabs the money, because brands are going to be dropping it in. So all I know is the CAGR is good, the growth rate is good, and there's a lot of people who are like in it looking to be the one that gets the money. You know what I mean? Like, hey, give me the money, because if you give me the $100,000, I'm going to tell the next story, or give me the $1 million, and I'll tell your next 5 years worth of stories. Just depends on who raises their hand and who's best at getting the money.
Yeah, I look at somebody like Des Linden. She's a great example of somebody who's always kind of flirted with transitioning over into trail and ultra running, but hasn't quite made the leap yet. And I do think a lot of that is just very practical. Like, as long as she gets 6 figures to show up to Boston or to New York, like, why would you pick that over winning 2,500 by finishing at the podium of a fast 50K? So we're not quite there yet, but
I think one of the telltale signs is when you see someone who could do that, who chooses trail running instead of road running.
Right.
Anyone right now, what we see, and I can't name all the names, but what you see is people when their road running career is winding. I don't want to say winding down, but they just they'll jump over to trail once they're not top 10 in a marathon or half marathon or whatever. And maybe not doing justice to this, but I think you know what I'm saying. Like, they're going to come after they do road running, not instead of road running, because the money is in road running. So once we see someone choose trail over road, then I think we'll know that we're in that danger zone.
Yeah, all we've had thus far is guys like Tim, Dave Elaney. They qualified. They had OTQs, Olympic trial qualifying times of like 2:13, 2:14.
Oh, wow.
Which is an incredible time, but you are effectively in no man's land as far as road running is concerned.
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to get you anything. Yeah, you have to be sub 210 to even flirt with the big money. So, I mean, we'll see. Time Time will tell, but as long as the sport keeps growing, I think and the money's going to obviously follow, and we'll just see what comes of that.
I feel like on some levels right now we don't have. I think we're flirting with too many 100-milers right now in America. When you look at like registration rates, there's obviously the marquee ones that sell out, and there's a lot more coming online, and I don't think the supply is there. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't think the demand is there for the amount of supply we have. I don't know if we've peaked on the 100-miler. I'm not going anywhere. I'm obsessed with it, but I wonder if 50K will eventually be the thing, or the 50 mile. I don't get excited about those things, but I just wonder if that's where a baller marathoner is going to say, all right, if there was ever like a centralized Golden Trail Series in Europe or something like that for in America that paid, I think that could be something that would draw. But it's all hypotheticals. It's not happening yet.
I will say I do think we will see trail running in the Olympics sooner rather than later.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the showdowns at the Golden Trail Series.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, at
Killian
Tim
and Patrick.
Tollefson's.
I mean, like it's freaking exciting. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Places like Europe, you have the cell coverage, you have the bandwidth to be able to do it justice.
Is that why? I mean, you're talking about the live coverage?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so, and the technology is just getting exponentially better.
Okay.
So I do think it's a matter of time. Maybe not the 100-miler, like let's take some baby steps
Yeah.
here. Like I do think that may be a never, but I do think as far as trail running is concerned, sub-ultra, maybe like right on the 50K line, I do think we'll see it in the Olympics.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what the money looks like in the sport at that point.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tyson.
Hey, Tyson.
So I just had a question to you guys. You keep saying responsible as you're talking about this growth and all this kind of stuff. Can you expand on that? Like, what do you mean, or what is your?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So the question was, how do we keep like responsible? What exactly does that mean? I just think that right now there's an and when it comes to a race like UTMB, which is super commercialized, a ton of money in it, to, no offense, but a race like Josh's race. Like, it's the same sport, but right now we can have both exist.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, with more and more money coming in, you can effectively bulldoze and affect smaller races, buy them out, undermine them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the spirit of what I'm talking about. I'm a laissez-faire guy. Like, I'm like pretty true capitalist at the end of the day, but at the same time, I do think like we can't just look the other way and just like let certain things happen. I do think that there are enough people in the sport who care about the sport and the integrity of the sport to not let that happen. So that's all I mean.
I think, there's a clear like divergent thing happening that we call them both trail running, but what happens at UTMB and what happens at the Salt Lake Foothills trail races, we call them both trail running, but they're just on two different paths. So in the last episode of the podcast, we looked at a bunch of different races and we broke it down to race cost per mile in terms of registration cost. And so we kind of looked at what we called middle class races like San Diego 100, Wasatch 100, and they were coming in at like $3.80 to $4 per race mile. Isn't this good? But our Vipa was coming in like $7.86 per race mile.
Yeah.
And I think that, if we say the industry is going a UTMB-ish direction and a Salt Lake Foothills-ish direction, UTMB is like, our Vipa is going in both of them. It seems like they have a good amount of people who are not elites, who are like crazy fans of it. And then, they got Black Canyon, they've got all these races. I think when I think about responsible within the race, I feel like what we're trying to do with Salt Lake Foothills, and there's a number of races, but we want to make it in that, what we're calling the middle class pricing. We wanted to, because I so romanticize Western states in the 1980s, 1990s, and Wasatch clearly, has my heart. And it's what they've always been about, where the race director is invested in the community. Like that version of trail running to me is I feel is responsible. But now the entrepreneur in me, I'm so happy with what UTMB is doing. I think market forces are at play, and it's going to work itself out to be what it needs to be, hopefully and most likely. But to me, when I say responsible, it's loaded and it's skewed and it's focused on that middle class pricing tier of like I always want this ability where someone who wants to run my race can afford it, but that tier always exists. I don't care what happens at UTMB. I mean, UTMB is actually only 420 euros compared to Javelina, which is after you buy your camping spot and everything like that, you're like $600. I just hope that tier never goes anywhere. To me, I feel like that's the most romantic, beautiful thing that I want to see last forever. Yeah.
I will just say, to Jamil's credit, I do think he is selling the overall experience. Like they do live broadcasts, they do, I think, like really nice swag, medals.
Yeah. I don't think he's price gouging.
Yeah.
He's getting it. I mean, the market is speaking. They're paying it. He's selling these races out at those high prices. So there's no judgment. That's purely observation.
Yeah. I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, he's a net good for the community. Anybody else have a question? Yeah, Flores.
Yeah, Billy. This is actually awesome. Good format. I like this.
Yeah.
I was actually pulling up some old emails. And there was
This is an HR call.
This is an intervention?
no. This is actually I was watching your videos in 2013. And in 2014, I was running my first ultra. And I actually sent you an email, and I just want to read the beginning over here because you gave me some really solid advice. Just want to see if you have any other follow-up advice 10 years later over here.
Wow.
So I wrote, "Hey Brian," I called you Brian instead of Billy because
Thanks for that. That's a lot for my imposter syndrome.
it's Flo from the Coyotes. We've never met, but we have several mutual friends. I've seen several of your videos now. The 7 hours to the snow and the 2013 year-end recap are rad. Next week, Saturday, I'm running my first ultra, the Avalon 50. I have a few questions, and then one of the questions was, you've ran several ultras. Is there anything you would do different now than with your first ultra? And you called out like running aid station to aid station, and you called out nutrition and like taking in more calories. Now, with 10 years more experience, do you have any other key lessons?
Oh, man. So I covered aid station to aid station, which effectively means stay in the present moment. Don't bite off more than you can chew. And then nutrition. I don't know. I guess just, to tie back to the theme of this conversation of just like having a strong purpose and a why. Like if all else fails, I think that you need to have that to go to. Whether it's something as incredibly large and heavy as like running for your son or running for yourself effectively to deal with as a coping mechanism, or because you committed to doing something that you want to finish and you said you're going to finish. I do think there's a million and one different reasons why people run this sport, but at the end of the day, whatever that reason is and that purpose is, has to be unnegotiable, and know that you are going to come out of it on the other side of this challenge a better person. Yeah. Anything you want to add to that?
If you commit to not having a beer the night before, don't have 2 beers or 3 beers. So have some discipline, and you will not have 8 of 10 DNFs. Hire a coach.
That's a lot more practical. Yeah.
Hire a
go with
coach
that
and just
answer.
do what they say.
Yeah.
Going back to your question, then he just answered it.
Yeah.
Why you do it.
That's why
We got our answer, yeah.
Listen, you put a little bit of the orange juice would freeze if you don't have vodka in it.
Yeah.
So you got to keep it from freezing. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So what you were saying about being an immigrant really resonated with me. I moved to the United States when I was 8, Didn't speak a word of English at all. And my entire life, I felt like I don't belong. Like I don't, it's like I don't have a home.
Yeah.
And when I'm here, it's like I'm not home. And then when I go home, I'm from Sweden. It feels like I've lived in the States at this point more than I had in Sweden. And so it's like I don't belong anywhere except for I do belong on the trail. Like when I'm outside and the further away I am from any human beings, like the more at home and at peace I feel. And I ran my first long race just last summer. I did 108K and it went like, I didn't look at the course because I loved running. I was just like, this is going to be amazing. It's going to be so fun. And I was like videoing and like, I was literally just having a ball like the whole time. And I came in and I was 4th female. And I was like, what? Like, I was just out here having a blast. And then I ran another 100K and I came 4th female. I ran a 50 miler the week after. And then I ended up doing a 100 miler last year. And that was not planned, you know, like it was not even like a concept in my head. And by the end of the season last year, I started feeling this itch to like podium and to be faster and to be better. And I slowly started to feel a little bit of my love and joy for the sport start to kind of like suffer, if that makes sense. And so like, I am like, I want to push myself and I want to know what I'm capable of. And I know there's way more inside of me, but I'm deathly afraid of losing that soul that you're talking about. Like the mid-pack, you know, cause like I ran short distances with a bunch of ladies for years and years, you know, like 3 miles. And I was like, oh my God, I'm amazing. I ran 3 miles. You know what I mean? And then just last summer, I was like, whoa, I didn't know I could do that. And I haven't hired a coach. So my question is, how do you guard your love of the sport and not lose your soul and balance pushing yourself like to your fullest? Because like, I can't sacrifice that. I started feeling like I was sacrificing that by the end of the season, but I still like really want to know, like, what am I made of? Like, how do you balance that? And what have you learned from interviewing elites, you know, and people who are not elites? Like, how do you merge the two? And like, what do you recommend to someone who's like new, like me, who's like thirsty to get better, but has to hang on to just like that pure love of the sport?
I'm the worst 100 miler in America, I think. I have a 20% finish rate, so I'm just gonna.
Well, I've only done one, so.
You're batting 1,000, right?
I got a 100% finishing rate, but
Yeah.
only done one.
My finish rate is even a bad batting average in baseball.
I am 4 for 4,
Hey.
but I will say the last 100-mile race that I ran, which coincidentally was the Wasatch 100, was arguably my worst performance. And I think it's because that anchoring purpose, why, that we just keep going back to, was not very strong and not very authentic. It was because I hadn't done it in a while. It's because maybe I was thinking about from a content perspective, and I was like super hyped after. I was like on the fence, but I got super hyped watching Jim Wamsley and Zach Miller battle at UTMB like a few days before, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna do it. And I did it, and from the jet lag to the wheels coming off the first 50K, kind of setting the mood for the rest of the race, I just was not in a good. It was just by sheer stubbornness and a very loving partner who kept encouraging me to keep moving forward that I got to that finish line, albeit in my worst, slowest time ever. But I gained a lot from that. And I think performance matters. I think getting the best out of yourself matters, no doubt. I'm also not the best person for that because I've tried having a coach and I felt kind of like how you did. My love for the sport, it became a have to and not a want to. And so I stopped using coaches. The last time I used a coach was probably like 2017. And But the one nugget that I did get from working with a coach is he did encourage me like 1 day a week. Don't take your Garmin or your Coros. Just throw time out the window. Don't bring an AirPod, your phone. Just go out there and run. And you could jot it down afterwards, count it towards Strava, or just don't count it at all, but just do that one run for yourself and see if you get that love back. So very practically, that would be my advice for you. But I do think somewhere in that equation is an and not an or. So I encourage you to work with someone, find someone who can get the best out of yourself, but also keep that North Star of like making sure you don't fall out of love with what you're doing, because it is a privilege to be able to do this and to be out there and lace up every single day.
Yeah, and I just like that you're thinking about how do you protect it, because I don't know of any other place where I get the gifts that ultra running gives me. And so if I don't think about how do I protect it, I don't have another thing that does for me what ultra running does for me. And so if you ruin it, and I've ruined it in various ways and all that, but just, I mean, I talk about it a lot. There's so many gifts that this sport gives us. And I think of it like a candle that you just want to keep the wind from blowing it out, because if that goes out, I don't have another place to deal with some things. This is the place where those gifts are received. Yeah, last question.
Sweet. So speaking back to Born to Run, something I found particularly compelling and interesting. In the beginning of that book, he talks about the rise of running kind of coincides with societal strife. That's a topic I haven't really heard spoken of to any depth other than that book. And for myself personally, I'm really new to the sport, but I got into it because of personal strife. From an industry standard, does that ever show up in the spreadsheets? Is there ever consideration that if the world magically gets a lot better, then the industry is going to crater? And also, do you guys have any thoughts on that concept?
So in a down market, total number of runners increases, but in the up market, it doesn't decrease commensurate with its increase. So it's like 1970, we had a boom. This is just recounting what you read and what is in Born to Run. Then you have the boom. 2001 with 9/11 was a big boom, and then the market crashes 07, 08, 09, and then COVID was so what we're all sort of skewed by and wondering how long this will last is not. It's the hockey stick is what we're curious about, how long it will last. Not, well, then we start to lose. You can't run 100 milers forever, so you lose elements of that. But I think in terms of looking at the spreadsheets and brands looking at that, maybe they'll have a 10-year plan or a 5-year plan, but you're kind of in the short term, you're riding the wave of, okay, revenue's coming in, or there's opportunity over here, and you're sort of chasing it. And content creators, maybe you could probably speak to that better. Like, how do you capture that? But it's probably more of like a real-time thing, if you know what I mean. Like, money's moving. We have all this. Now we're suffering from the inflationary problems, but when that money was moving, there were brand deals happening like crazy with creators and people in my world. So do they factor it in? I don't know that they're looking for calamity to say there's going to be if this happens in politics, then we're going to have some runners. I don't know if that's happening, but I've been surprised by many things in life, possibly.
I don't really have anything to add.
Yeah, it is.
I never thought about it. I never framed it that way, so I never really thought about running as like having some kind of linear.
It's at least in that book he ties it to, but then after the book came out, whatever 09 comes out, it happened again like 2013, it happened again with COVID, so it does keep doing that in times of depression or recession. Hey, thanks. I also want, again, I didn't mention a couple of other partners earlier. Sports Salt Lake, Visitors Bureau of Salt Lake has partnered with us. Brooksy Timing. Our timing is going to be really, really great this year by comparison to last year. Brooksy has this really interesting technology, Bluetooth technology, that is the best in class. I'm super stoked on that. They're blowing up right now. They're a Utah-based company, but their race timing is unmatched. And that's it. Billy, thank you.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for coming out.